On your marks, get set, let's begin.
Hello.
Oh, I see what you did there. That was good.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at offradarpodcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee, yeah.
I did my wee-wee.
Hello and welcome back to Off Radar. I am joined by Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige. Put you first there. You see that? And James Eatock.
Hello. Yeah, you threw me. I was getting ready to go. Hello. And
oh
Nige...
my! Stop. Hello.
Keep looking. Right. Yeah.
Oh. Today we are talking about Go. Remember that film from 1999? Well,
Go.
There we go. We are talking about that, directed by Doug Limans and written by John August. It's got a huge ensemble cast, so I'm not going to name everyone, but yeah, I guess our top three: Sarah Polley, Katie Holmes, Timothy Olyphant, and then a number more that we'll get to as we go on.
A number more?
A number more.
A number more.
Is that a line?
No.
I don't care. I like it. A number more.
Just before we get going, that pun is going to happen a lot. I realised as I started watching
I didn't even notice that.
Just before we get going, I realised as I started watching this film, although I thought I'd seen it, I hadn't. Because I remember the poster and the marketing so well. And you know, some films, you just think, oh yeah, I must have seen that. But it's just one of those films that I'd actually not seen, but I was convinced I had. But I started watching this and I said, no, I have not seen this film. So
no to go is what you were saying.
No to go,
yeah.
Which is mad. I take it you guys saw this at the time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, for me, it was one of the... When I first got my shiny DVD player, it was one of the first films I ever got on DVD. So it's been in my collection ever since then, since like the early noughties. Was a big Katie Holmes fan at the time from Old Dawson's Creek, being that young, impressionable lad I was. And also a big fan of Doug Limans because I'd seen Swingers as well, which I'm sure we'll speak about a fair bit during this pod.
I mean, I was a massive Swingers fan.
I saw this... Yeah, before Swingers, so I did it the other way around.
Right, yeah.
Like Nige, this was I think I bought 2 DVDs before I had a DVD player, and it was Ghostbusters, which is like one of the all-time great DVDs, and Go. So I bought them from a fledgling young company at the time called Amazon.com. So yeah, those are my first 2 DVDs, and I've still got them to this day, and it's like... If ever I get rid of all my DVDs, which probably will happen in decades from now, I'm still going to keep Go and Ghostbusters because they just look nice together. But I went to see this at the cinema. I'd seen the trailer for it, and I was really hyped for it for some reason. I was like, oh wow! Plus, it was like, well, you've got these Hollywood people, and you've got Desmond Askew from Grange Hill. As we'd all, you know, I was really excited. So yeah, I was really excited to see it, and I went to cinema after, I think, when did it come out? Like late '99, and I was just really like a few months into working at the civil service. Came out one night. It's that lovely kind of dark evening. I was like, I'm just going to go and watch a film, and went to the Odeon Mezzanine in Leicester Square. I don't know if it's still there, and watched it. Paid stupid money even back then to watch it on a very small screen in the Odeon Mezzanine. If you've ever been in the Odeon Mezzanine, it's crazy. Their screens are so... You're like, I'm going for a cinema experience. This is... Yeah, granted, it's a big screen, but yeah, it's just like, oh. But it was still a really good experience, and a very 1999 film to watch at the time.
Well, it's something else as well that I didn't realise until I watched it again recently, having, as said, owned it for such a long time, is that really it could have quite easily fallen into one of our Christmas films.
Yes!
The whole film is set during Christmas, which I just never really clocked before, even though there's a scene where they go for like Christmas dinner at someone's house. There's like fairy lights on in a car the entire time. They go to a rave that's called like Merry Xmas or something like that. There's loads of references, but for whatever reason, none of them ever really sunk in. So,
and Etok, you recommended this one for us to watch, which, was a bit of a red herring. I don't know. I just, not red herring. It was one of those.
It was a blue herring. It was what it was.
It was a herring of some kind.
It's Christmas herring.
But it was just like, well, this film's come out of nowhere. I've not even thought about this film for 20 years. Could you maybe give us a rough idea of what
just before going on air, everybody, behind the scenes info, I just revealed that I forgot to write a synopsis for this movie. Firstly, I should say the film is not really linear in the sense it jumps back and forward a number of times between 3 different stories and kind of wraps up with a 4th chapter. The film takes place over one night, I guess. Yeah. And it's about 3... Oh, God, you can see I'm struggling already. Smith,
I was going to say, it's like, what happened?
Smith, you're going to have to edit the crap out of this. Howdy, Off Radar fans. James Etok here. So when we recorded this episode, I was asked to provide a synopsis for Go. Unfortunately, because this movie isn't linear and because you're dealing with a vast cast and because I hadn't prepared for it, I kind of butchered it. So here is a far more concise synopsis of Go. The movie takes place mainly over the course of one evening night. Rona, Simon and Claire work at a supermarket. Simon heads off to Las Vegas with his friends. A short while later, Adam and Zach arrive at the supermarket to buy some drugs from Simon. However, as Simon isn't present, Rona decides to liaise with Simon's dealer, Todd Gaines, and takes Claire with her. This results in Rona kind of screwing over Todd Gaines, who seeks vengeance. Meanwhile, Simon's trip to Las Vegas takes many a crazy turn, resulting in he and his friends being chased back to Los Angeles. At the same time, Adam and Zach are under pressure to ensure that the drug deal with Rona happens for a certain individual. Also, a cat talks.
So what are you up to tonight?
We're going to this party tonight, this warehouse thing.
Some sort of rave thing.
Is this gonna be cool?
Yeah, I guess.
Does the British guy still work here?
We went to Vegas for the weekend.
The British guy usually hooks us up.
Let me see what I can do. Give me a number.
I can't believe you're selling allergy medicine.
Oh, we're out of that. We're down to chewable aspirin.
I think I feel something.
I'll just start off by saying I forgot how awesome the intro to this film is with all the club scenes, and I will start off by saying, but one of the hardest things to convince the audience of, the cinema, the film-going audience, whatever, is of a club scene. They always seem to do it in films so wrong, where you can tell that there's no music playing, because as they're talking you can hear them echoing. The only time it's ever been convincingly done in terms of club scenes, I would say, is this film, because the club scenes are so good, especially when Manny's tripping. That fucking scene is incredible.
Honestly, his entire performance in this film is absolutely incredible.
And it's funny because Manny is probably like, out of all the characters, next to the 2 other guys in the Vegas episode, Breckenmeyer and I forget the actor's name, but the guy who plays Sing as well. Those 2 and Manny are probably like the least developed characters in the film. But Manny is so scene stealing with his sings, with his performances. But yeah, the club scenes in the opening, I was just like, oh my god! And it's set to like this, I guess, remix of These Boots Were Made for Walking.
Like, intercuts with like the Columbia logo as well. And even though I hadn't seen this film in a serious amount of time, like well over 10 years, as soon as the Columbia logo came up and it had the first tiny bit, I was like, I remember this, and it does it, as you say, so well. It's really good.
Having come in into this film like for the first time, when it starts like that, like my reference straight away was Human Traffic, which came out pretty much the same year, and I thought,
nice one, bravo.
Is this film going to be like, you know, that trippy kind of absolute mental, because that's how it starts with the you know, like that, and then obviously it's quite a lot more than that, but it has I would say slightly differently to Human Traffic, it has a much more kind of indie feel, and in Doug Limans kind of style, you know, lots of quick camera pans and moves, and it feels like much more kind of authentic in that sense, whereas Human Traffic was very trippy and
Human
bizarre,
Traffic is
people
Human Traffic is somewhere in between Train Spotting and Go, I think, in terms of, you know, what's going on and how intense it is.
I was just going to say I agree, like in the sense of the way it's shot, it seems almost like sort of handy cam, really rough around the edges. It was a lot rougher than I remembered it being. I thought it was a bit more glossy, but obviously that is like Doug Liman's style. And I remember seeing a couple of the scenes, especially later on in the film when they're in Vegas, and there's even like a car chase. I mean, it goes really away from this like original drug story, thinking, cool, I can see where he got his influences for like the Bourne series, which he directed the first one of, like after this.
My goodness,
and like even with the club scene as well, him directing that, like he said he'd never actually even been to a club before filming that scene, and after he'd done it he was like, oh, turns out I really like clubbing, and got really interested in it afterwards. So yeah, it's crazy how like these influences can come, and from people who don't necessarily have that background as well.
The one thing I found also really interesting, so you go from the club and then all of a sudden you're in a supermarket, and it's really run down and blue lights. It looks kind of so clinical and like a prison, you know. It's Rona's like just played by Sarah Polley, just kind of like going through the motions, and you know, I don't think she smiles in this film once.
That's the thing. I love her. Well, she does a few times, but I love her attitude and demeanour in it. It's so kind of, because obviously I think she's
just all in her eyes, 20s,
but she's supposed to be like, you know, I guess late teens or something, and she's just got that kind of like, you know, kind of thing. But also working with that kind of people, like those kind of customers as well, where the customer's being a bit of an arse. And she's just like, you know,
and obviously
paper or plastic.
Everyone can identify with that kind of menial job when you're, you know, 18, 19, 20, around that time.
There's 2 points like that tie into that. One is that you're right about the casting. Like, she's older than she's supposed to be in the film, but they really struggled to cast anyone of the actual age because of the themes. Like, there's violence, there's drugs, there's sexual references, everything else. They struggled to get anyone under the age of 18.
Oh, wow.
But the thing with Sarah Polley as well, like Sarah Polley, for those who don't know, was quite a sort of well-known child actor. One of the most sort of famous films she was in was The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, directed by Terry Gilliam.
Oh my God, she's in that.
Yeah, she's the little girl in that, and she basically was almost tortured during that production, to the extent like she completely fell out of love with film. Wow. She had a really sort of despairing sort of opinion of it, I suppose. And by the time a film like Go came around, the director I saw in a film called The Sweet Hereafter, and was really, really desperate to get her in the film, sent her the script, and without even reading it, she was like, no, I don't want to do it. And like, she had turned down so many films during this period of her career. She was like, I don't want to be part of the Hollywood machine. I'm not interested. Like, and Doug Liman got her agent to arrange a meeting with her, where again, she kind of met him, liked the idea of him, obviously, like the swinger stuff, the fact that he did things that were a little bit off the wall, a little bit more indie, and that kind of convinced her to maybe give him a shot. And then at the end of the meeting, she was like, all right, give me the script and I'll read it. And he was like, I don't have a script on me. And she's like, you're supposed to be this like indie director who loves film, you haven't even got a script on you. And again, she was like, I'm done, I'm not interested. Like, she was really busting his balls. And he luckily went to his car and found like a really basically marked up script that he'd done with the editor that had loads of their own writing on, kind of like, oh, this line's terrible, we've got to change this line. And because the script was almost so disparaging of the film, that actually intrigued her more than if they'd have given her kind of a glossy, oh, this script's perfect, it's ready to go kind of situation. And you can see how her attitude at the time of being so disinterested, so just like, ugh, about this whole situation, really helps her character in the film, because it's exactly like that job, that role. And even during the film, when she's doing things where you'd think, oh, your heart rate's probably going, she manages to kind of keep that demeanour of just being kind of, I don't know, disillusioned youth and not necessarily that interested.
Oh yeah,
so,
she plays that role so well. Like
I think she's my favourite character in the whole film, and the fact that Lyman decides to start with a strong female lead, like, you know, her and Katie Holmes are so kind of prevalent in the entire film, which obviously contrasts massively to the kind of masculinity and misogyny of the Vegas part of the story. So really clever how these like stories are all, although they're all linked and they're all kind of like, well, friends loosely, they're also different and stand apart.
Listen, I just want to make a deal here. Can we make a deal?
Are you Monty Hall?
Now watch what I do with his wrist. Heck, down like that, bump. You know, I watch all these cop shows, and they never do it right. Ever.
So yeah, we meet Adam and Zach, and at first, you know, in this first act, they're just kind of two guys, we think, initially, and they want the drugs from Rona. And obviously Simon's out of town, he's gone to Vegas. She goes to Todd Gaines, and I forgot how good and scary Timothy Olyphant is in this film.
Oh yeah.
Apart from having they cast him so well, because I remember this was the first film I'd ever seen him in. I think he'd done a few things beforehand, but his character is so intense, and you know, he plays, I forget what that piece of music is, rams up the volume and has Sarah Polley, who's trying to make this deal with him. He whispers something in her ear, which we kind of find out what he said to her later on. She stands up, she shakes her top off, she's got her bra on, and she spins round. He just makes her spin around. Then he just turns the music back down and like does a drug deal with her.
You come here out of the blue asking for 20 hits, just so happens 20 is the magic number where intent to sell becomes trafficking?
Todd, I would never fuck you like that.
How would you fuck me?
He's checking for a wire, isn't he? Because she asked for 20 basically ecstasy, and 20 is the limit where it goes from sort of dealing to trafficking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Much bigger.
He's checking for a wire, but there's also this, because he's just like gets with random women. There's also this other kind of sexual thing
element,
as well as that. Especially the fact that he's got his top off and he's ripped and he's.
Oh yeah, as well. I mean, that's the thing. That's why he's so well cast, because you know, often there was another film that came out many years later, Guy Ritchie film called Rock and Roller, and I forget who they had a druggie in that, and he was ripped, because the whole point is when you're kind of an intense drug user, you're supposed to be in films, is, you know, because drugs take away your appetite, you're supposed to be like really thin and ripped, so it kind of works to a degree when you see like Todd Gaines, and he's just he's a very statuesque man. I remember watching this as a 22-year-old thinking, I'm gonna look like that one day. I never looked like that. I just got really fat.
You should have got the flaming dice tattoo. He's got his necky top. I think it would suit you.
And frosted tips. And that was Smith's. When I first met Smith, he had frosted tips.
Absolutely.
Frosted Smith, we used to call him. But I think one of the biggest first laughs in this film, and it's such a kind of, it's a trope that kind of gets mocked to a degree, but I think you can look lovingly on it, is when he's talking to, you know, Sarah Polley sits back down and she goes, yeah, I'm going to pay you after I've done the deal. And he was like, pfft. And she goes, how about if I leave you something?
Collateral.
I already got a fucking swatch. I need something I know you'll come back for.
No, I'm not going up there.
It's 45 minutes, hour tops. You just have to sit there.
No, he's a drug dealer.
And Claire's like, no, I'm not doing it. It's just that wonderful kind of cliched, almost sitcom-esque, well, I'm not going in there, cut to they're going in there. And she goes, yeah, I'll be back by 6:30. And then the next scene is them driving up to the house where Adam and Zach are, pulling up to the house, and the caption just says 6:30. You're like, oh right, so she's already late. And they go into the house, and the way this scene is acted and played is so clever, because now we're introduced to William Fichtner's character, who plays this random bloke called Burke, who happens to be in the same house as Adam and Zach. And it's so well played, because as an actor, you have to, you know, William Fichtner as Burke is playing a character who's a cop undercover, but has to also, as an actor, be like really transparent, so she figures out he's a cop very quickly.
Now, Zach tells me that you've got 20 at 20, is that right?
You got a bathroom?
Yeah,
Right down the hall on the right? Yeah, let me show you.
When she walks past him, he kind of leans in and says something that you don't see or hear. And then later on in the film, when it's doing things from a different camera angles and you see it from different perspectives, you can see that he actually says to her, "Go," which is obviously the title of the film and does happen at other points in the film as well. Yeah, just like each chapter has a go moment, essentially.
So she leaves, they go to the rave, and she decides to start selling teenagers aspirin and pretend, normal over-the-counter drug.
It's so good that when she's actually like with these kids, they're all like thinking that they're experiencing it by the placebo effect, basically, and she's like, just take it with dope, loads of dope. So they're all getting really high and going, "Oh yeah, I can feel it, man." And it's like, no, they're basically got allergy tablets or whatever it was. And
it was allergy tablets, and then it's a chewable aspirin. I love. It's just like, but and then obviously that's where we get the real Manny tripping scene, where he's tripping inside the club, and they try and escape around this kind of back entrance, and it's really like, you want to talk about Doug Limans directing again. It's really like, if
it's really in your face and
you feel that claustrophobic, if that's the word. You feel like suffocation as Manny, and like she puts him under a tin like roof that's just like some bit of it looks like an old tin roof. She's like, "Stay there and I'll come and get you afterwards." She goes out in the car park, Todd Gaines is there, and he's gonna and then randomly she's hit by this yellow car, and we don't see the drivers inside, and we're like, oh. Act 2, and now we're in Vegas.
Well, it doesn't go straight to Vegas. It goes back to the beginning when they're all in the supermarket, the people, and it's like, so it always starts from the same point where these three characters kind of almost go off in different directions.
And it always kind of, the way they cut it, or film and cut it, is like they show different angles from each of those scenes. So every time they replay the scene, it will be from Simon's point of view rather than Rona's, and then Claire's or whoever a bit later on. But yeah, it's clever how they do that, because then you're like, for the first time you watch that first story, and especially if you haven't seen the film, you're like, oh, okay, so now we're going to see the next character, and it obviously goes into Simon, who is in Vegas.
But just quickly before we move on to Simon, because I know we're desperate to, like the film originally was conceived as a short film that was just Rona's story. Like, it wasn't supposed to be the additional branches, like what happens with Simon, what happens with the two guys, or everything else like that. So yeah, it was, and they kind of obviously added that story to make it into a full-length feature film. So whether or not there would have been a continuation from Rona's story that we weren't aware of, or obviously all the bits that tie together, but yeah.
Well, that's fascinating, because I didn't know that. And then, obviously we jump into Vegas, and we've got bright lights. We've got four guys. All of them are pretty unlikable. Sorry, pretty likable. They've got one.
They're very 90s.
One guy who's doing really 90s, over the top acting.
Tay Diggs is great. Tay Diggs is he's like,
he's good. He's the guy out of Equilibrium, isn't he?
I've never. Oh yeah, he is. And this is all I ever know. If you say Tay Diggs, I'm like, oh, the guy from Go. Tay Diggs.
Okay. And then there's one of the guys who, I wasn't sure who he was. But he's like, basically trying to be black, which was just like so like,
Breckin Meyer. I saw him at
he's in everything, man. Yeah, he was that era of like road trip, that Rat Race or whatever it was called, like loads of things like that.
His character is incredibly annoying and not funny, in my opinion,
but that's the whole point. It's supposed to be, like, and
they all find him really annoying, but the first thing, obviously, I'm like, being a Swingers fan, especially growing up and making films, like the Vegas thing was like, oh shit, like Doug Liman's done this before with Swingers, and then you kind of see it with Go, like the bright lights and the quick pans and stuff. And obviously when he did Swingers, it was probably a bit more rogue, because they literally jumped out of the car and filmed it without getting permission. So with Go, it was like his chance to do it again, but
and spend
some money. But also,
they're in a Ferrari at one point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like his chance to relive his Swingers moment. But then also, there's that huge contrast between Vegas and this grotty supermarket and club back in I'm not sure where it's set actually. That first scene.
It's LA. It's
Los Angeles, yeah.
Okay. And it, like you're right about the supermarket as well. Just to sort of mention on that, like originally when this is like every filmmaker's nightmare. Essentially, they had someone go out doing all the locations, trying to find a suitable place. Found the supermarket, told the supermarket we're going to do this. Went away, and the supermarket thought, well, if we're going to be in a film, we better make it look a lot nicer. So they did the whole place up, and when they came back to film, they were like, this isn't what we want at all. So they had to spend extra budget basically turning it back into like the slum it looks like in the final film, just to make sure it kind of fit the story, really, because as you say, it adds that huge amount of contrast between the Vegas and the supermarket and the lives they come from and the lives Simon and his mates are kind of going off to experience.
Keep it close, just an extra $10 in it for you. Get in the car.
You stole a car, shot a bouncer, and had sex with 2 women?
I went to Las Vegas about 5 years after seeing this film, and it was very much like you picture it. You've got the seedy side of it, you've got I love Vegas, but for 3.5 nights, 4 nights at best. But it is so funny when you're walking down the Strip, or you go to Old Vegas, which is where the big neon signs are and stuff, and you get those signs where it's like, one of the best photos I ever took in Vegas is this, and it was like, nude girls, live nude. It's like, yeah, we can. There's 3 like cheap not billboard, just like worded signs. It's like, yeah, we get it. And it's, you can imagine the kind of seediness of these places. And that's what I love about this part of the film, is that they really show you the kind of underbelly of Vegas.
I think the thing when we first go into this story, because I've seen, what I've seen with Rona, I've seen basically all the wheels fall off and a big kind of crash at the end. So coming into this fresh, I'm like, right. And you're waiting for that moment of despair. You're waiting for it to kick off, because it starts, like we said, like quite nice, and they're going to Vegas, they go to a strip club, and you're like, right, where's it going to kick off? And obviously that's the moment, and then it kind of escalates into, well, pretty much carnage, chases and guns, and there's even a bit with Simon where he gets with two girls
at a wedding. He
starts doing the Irish accent.
He does, this weird Irish accent, even though he's British, so he probably could get away with that. And then they set fire to the room, and I couldn't help thinking of that Mr. Bean episode where he runs out the room naked and he's running down the hotel, and I'm like, I don't know if you've seen the Mr. Bean episode, and he goes down the stairs.
I can't remember
and
that.
He's hanging off the stairs, and there's a little old woman.
I know what you mean.
Walking down the
Anyone
stairs.
listening can go check it out on YouTube.
Please.
Just search like Mr. Bean in the nudie or something like that, and you'll get some weird matches. Don't do it on a work computer.
Yeah, don't do it on work computer.
Go incognito and with a VPN. But
there's a man of experience.
Apparently, but not just for Mr. Bean. And he goes under the rug and stuff. Anyway, that's Mr. Bean. But it just I just couldn't help thinking about. It's like, how has this film suddenly become, like that kind of slapstick, silly?
I think the Vegas adventure, the Vegas adventure lends itself to that, though, because you've got these 4 dickheads to a degree. I kind of excuse Marcus slightly because he is the one that he seems to be like the most grounded out of the 4.
He is. I mean, look, we haven't made this comparison yet, but we're going to have to make it soon. Like, obviously, Pulp Fiction came out a few years before.
Oh yeah,
and this is obviously heavily influenced by Pulp Fiction. The whole storytelling techniques, the writing, and even some of the characters. I would say that Marcus's character is basically a little bit of a wise Samuel L. Jackson kind of, that's what they're playing with there.
I remembered very little about the third act. I remember
you and me both, absolutely, yeah.
But I forgot there was so much to enjoy about it. It seems to be the less focused of the 3 acts, 3 chapters. I say of the 3. There's obviously the additional one at the end, but there's like the guy said, you go back to now. Las Vegas story ends. Now we're back in supermarket, back in the supermarket, and it's the beginning of the story again. And we get Claire sitting. When Simon and Rona are doing their initial exchange. You see Claire sitting there, and the telly's next to it, and the camera pans towards the telly, and Adam and Zach are on TV, and you're like, wait a minute. I remember at the time in the cinema watching this, thinking,
I was really confused by that. I having come fresh into their film, I was like, wait a minute, I recognise those guys from earlier in the film.
From the first story.
And that's obviously the intention, because we find out that they're not who you think they are. They're actually actors, which really was like, oh wow. And actually throughout this whole film there's lots of little plot twists that happen, nice touches, and mostly in this final act.
So she sees them on the TV, and as you said, we saw them earlier, and then it goes into their story where as TV actors they've been busted for possession, and now the cop, played by William Fichtner, says to them, we're going to use you guys to basically get a bigger fish. We're going to use you to get your dealer, then we're going to flip that person and get their dealer, and so on and so forth. But he acts really strange around the entire time.
His awkwardness.
Yeah, it's so awkward, and he's like, oh, you must really work out. Yeah, and it's like, it's in our contract. And you've got sort of Scott Wolf and Jay Moore, who play it really well, actually.
Really well.
They were really... The thing about Scott Wolf being cast, now, for people who don't remember, he was in Party of Five with sort of Nev Campbell and Matthew Fox as well, who went on, obviously, to do, like, Lost, and Nev Campbell obviously did Scream. He didn't have quite a successful career, but because Katie Holmes had already been cast, Doug Liman was really wary about casting someone else from TV, and this suddenly becomes seen as, like, this TV film. You've also got sort of the character who played Jenna Malone from Ally McBeal that shows up as well.
Oh, Jane Krakowski?
Yeah, absolutely. But he, during like the casting, when Jay Moore and Scott Wolf were just talking in the corridor, Doug Liman happened to walk past and just noticed their chemistry was incredible. And because they're not only playing TV actors, it turns out you kind of find out they're actually lovers as well. He just thought, this is too good an opportunity to pass up. Forget the TV stuff, I'm having him in. Especially because obviously Scott Wolf was playing someone who is a TV actor as well. And they just do a really, really nice turn.
I love that bit you mentioned earlier, though, when you see the alternate angle of Jay Moore saying, oh, let me show you to the bathroom, and then he just mouths go to her. But he does it, it's such a great little moment because it's kind of done slow, and I remember seeing that in the cinema. It's one of those things you don't forget, and thinking that is so cool. At this point, though, we've seen one thing. They're driving around in a yellow car. We're like, oh, hang on a second. This is...
I kind of saw this bit come in. Like,
oh, you did?
Yeah, I just kind of... like, as soon as they went to the club, I was like, oh, well, right. I wonder if these are going to be the guys that run Rona over.
I can't. What do you mean? I can't do this. I can't do this. Listen to me. She's dead. Listen to me. She's dead. She's not dead. She's dead, and I hit her, and I killed her.
And at that point with her, when they run her over, because obviously they come back and they like, right, we're going to, she's either dead or she's going to be dead. We need to do something with the body. And when they first find her, it's never... unless I missed this, it's never clear if they recognise her,
that's a very good point.
Because she's battered and bruised, and they don't say, oh, it's Rona from earlier on in the house. But they never actually talk about it being her, I don't think, at all, actually.
No, they don't. They don't.
So that's a little kind of question mark, like, do they know or not? And yeah, it's a nice little question mark.
When they ran away from Vegas, when Simon left Vegas, he'd shot one of the strip club guys. So now it's like, well, I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
Shoot him in the arm. And it's this wonderful scene where the father's there, the father of the strip club owner. And he's like, I can't do it. He's like, what do you mean you can't do it? You should put a gun. He goes, I can't shoot him if he knows it's coming. And Simon's there going, it's all right. It's just right there. That's the fleshy bit. Just right there.
Yeah, he's drawn a cross on his arm where he wants to get shot.
You get that wonderful moment with like Katie Holmes as Claire, sort of just looking around like, what is... And she just leaves because she's like, this is absurd.
But I think just before that as well, as an audience member, you're waiting for the gun to go off because they hold on that wide shot of him with the arm there for ages. And like, I didn't know what was coming. So I was like, oh man, he's going to shoot him in the arm. He's going to shoot him in the arm, and it's all the anticipation of this moment rather than the moment, which is obviously a very well directed and written scene that you don't actually see the gunshots, because like you say, like Katie Holmes walks out the door and then you hear her kind of like bang, and she like looks, and it's like, what does he say?
Yeah, he goes, I'm all right. Now we get Sarah Polley being checked out of hospital, and she's all like battered.
Wakes up, Kill Bill style.
Yeah, Kill Bill style. She's all over the place.
But it still looks pretty good considering she's nearly died.
Yeah, she's got like a limp, but she's like,
a limp and a little cut on her head. Yeah. It does, I think, a wonderful job of like juggling so many different characters.
It definitely packs so many into what is actually only an hour and 40-minute film, which I was quite surprised about.
Yeah.
But I think the thing for me was, like, just generally speaking, I really enjoyed Rona's story. Like, I felt like that story was so strong. I was actually
very tight.
Yeah, it was so tight and really well told. And when you said that was the original film, that kind of made sense to me. So when they went off to Vegas and it becomes this kind of like half American Pie, half Swingers, I was actually a bit disappointed with that middle part of the film. I thought it was just not very funny, and I was just waiting for that bit to end. I just wanted to get back to where I was in the supermarket, which obviously comes later. So that bit, that middle 20 minutes kind of spoiled part of the experience for me with the film.
Oh, wow. I think it's very of its time, isn't it, that middle bit? So I can understand that, definitely.
Yeah, it kind of jumped out, and I don't think it has held up well. And maybe it's because I've only just seen it for the first time.
I was going to say, I think this is where the nostalgia thing comes in for me, because I remember at the time, 1999, in the cinema, thinking the second act was like the strongest, and I totally understand.
Don't get me wrong, there's great moments in it, but then I think when the story comes back, and obviously you need that kind of getaway from it, but when we come back and we start interweaving again with the final part of the story, I just suddenly found like I was back into that same film again, and it didn't feel so disconnected, which is obviously so ironic as they're all so connected.
Well, it's interesting. Like as we've kind of said, it's like an hour and 40 minutes. It was a film released in the late 90s. It didn't do amazingly well at the box office.
No.
Cost 20 million to make, made 28.5. So like did okay if you had in marketing costs. It probably did enough to break even, but since then it certainly got a cult following. I think, as Etok and I both said, we got it on DVD, so we contributed to that cult following, and it was, to be fair, it was quite well critically received around the time, as especially considering a lot of the actors had come from either TV or hadn't done a huge amount before, and you can tell it's kind of got that rough and ready thing. And obviously Doug Limans went on to do sort of bigger and potentially better things, or to some degrees worse things. Like I definitely think it's a film of its time, and
I agree.
It's never on TV. It's a sort of film that you never kind of, unless you kind of go out your way to watch it, you wouldn't even know it existed.
But yeah, going back to your Pulp Fiction thing earlier, Smith, where you were talking about the characters, I think that's one of those annoying things. I understand the comparison, don't get me wrong, but you had, after Pulp Fiction, any film that came out that was an independent movie, or a film that played with the story and wasn't linear, or just a film where characters would be talking in a car. Every film became like, even I think
comparison. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if you look at the back of the bloody US DVD I've got for the film, it says, a modern Pulp Fiction, or Pulp Fiction but crazier, or something like that. It's just one of these, and it's just like, can we stop?
Even Lock, Stock being a year before Train Spotting, like all of these kind of films are, like with Lock, Stock, for instance, it's similar in some ways, and
I understand those comparisons. Like, you're allowed to make them, there's no doubt about that. But I think this is like one of those movies that I feel that it feels far more independent than Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, it's much rawer and edgy.
Oh, certainly.
Or kind of less glossy, definitely.
I understand the Pulp Fiction comparison, but yeah, I just feel like this is its own kind of thing.
I really sort of, when I watched this again, I really got that Pulp Fiction vibe. I really just thought, it's another one of these types of films where it's like, it's intertwining, there's 3 separate acts, it all ties itself together. And again, when I tend to watch a film, I tend to remember it really sort of long term. I remembered snippets of this, but I'd forgotten quite a good chunk of it. And yeah, for me, it certainly reminded me. So I've just gone around in circles saying that, but yeah, I agree with Smith.
Got any trivia for us, Nige?
How dare you ask me such a thing? Of course I got trivia. I got loads of trivia. I'll give you 2 quick snippets. One of them, Timothy Olyphant was actually cast in a film called Practical Magic, which I think's got like, is it Nicole Kidman and
Sandra Bullock, isn't it?
Sandra Bullock, yeah. And he actually got fired from that really early on.
Wow.
But had already like booked his hotel for LA, so his agent scrambled to get him any kind of role, and lo and behold, he managed to get a last minute role as Todd Gaines in Go, and stayed in the same hotel room. So everything worked out for the best. So there you go. So he was replaced by Aidan Quinn in Practical Magic. But
I thought the trivia was going to be Timothy Olyphant was originally called Timothy Elephant. I'd have been like, wow.
Yeah, see, every time I try and pronounce his name, I just think, just go elephant with an O. But my other bit of trivia relates to Sarah Polley. Now, I mentioned earlier on in terms of like how she really had to be sold this film, and she's been very anti the film industry, and in fact after this film she didn't do a single interview about the film for 20 years because she was so dissatisfied with the press, and it was nothing to do with like her opinion of the film. She liked working on the film, she liked Doug Limans, she just hated the whole idea of basically press junkets and stuff like that. And she said like the reason why she took the role, sort of aside from the fact like the script was all muddy and like it was very self-deprecating, was the fact that scene in the beginning when they're in the supermarket, she's serving this woman who's basically just got this real scowl on her face and basically said, I used to have your job, and she says back to her, oh, and look how far it got you, and she loved that line so much she did the film. Now Doug Liman loved working with Sarah Polley, so much so that when it came to writing to working on his next film, The Bourne Identity, he wanted to cast her as the main female lead in the role eventually played by Famke Potente, who is actually German in the film. Now the original script had Jason Bourne in Canada, Sarah Polley being Canadian, and it would have essentially been a completely different film. But lo and behold, Sarah Polley said no, because as I said, she said no to quite a lot of films around that period. She's gone on to do loads of other good stuff. She's a really accomplished director as well, but could have been a completely different film, really, The Bourne Identity. So there you go, there's my trivia.
Very nice.
Just trivia.
Ratings. I think we've given a kind of rough overview of what we think, but like I guess, go on, Nige, kick us off as we're with you.
I'm really on the fence on this one. Like, coming into seeing this film, I just fully expected I'd watch it, I'd really enjoy it again. As I said, I've had it in my DVD collection for 20 odd years, and it'd be like a decent rating. But watching it back today, it was actually today that I watched it, so it's fresh in the memory. I kind of agree with Smith that I absolutely loved the first section, the first story, like Rona's story, but after that the other two I feel are so much weaker. There's a lot of fun to be had in them, especially kind of like the swingers sort of reference, the Vegas stuff, but it just doesn't hold up quite as well, and the way it kind of comes together at the end just seemed a bit anticlimactic to me, and it actually surprised me a lot, because I expected that nostalgia to take over, but it actually to me felt a lot more dated than I expected. And whilst I love the direction, I love the style, I love the fact it isn't that sort of smooth and it's sort of a bit mucky around the edges, however you want to describe it, it wasn't quite what I hoped and quite what I remembered it to be, and I'm gonna give it a 6.
What? No, okay, yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, it was so close to being a 7. And like, to be honest, if I grade the sections, Sarah Polley's one, the first one, it'd probably be an 8. And then the other two would be like 6s or 5s, and that's what's kind of balanced out. So
I'll follow on from there, I think. So I totally agree. Like, I actually rated each section because I felt I felt that was kind of fair, and I thought the first section was like an 8. I thought the middle section was like a 5, and the end was like between 6 and a 7. So overall, I've given it a 6 as well.
I thought you said overall I've given it like a 19 or something like that. I've added them all up.
I felt like I enjoyed this film. I wasn't really sure what to expect, having thought I'd watched it, which was slightly weird. I really enjoyed aspects of the middle section, but mainly because of the swingers kind of thing. And I think Doug Liman is a really talented director, and that shines through. I think sometimes the script is clever, but almost sometimes a bit too clever. Some of the acting is pretty clunky, and I don't know if that's intentional or not, but like, I just found like Simon's character throughout all three, like I could take him out of the film, really. I think when you look at other films, like, I can't help compare it to Lock, Stock and Pulp Fiction. For me, Go is nowhere near them, so that's why I would give it a 6. Etok, raise the average a bit for us.
Raise the average. Oh, you're damn right I'm going to. So yeah, I totally understand both your opinions. I think I was most interested in, especially as we did it and I found out you hadn't seen it, so I'm really interested in what Nige was going to give it, because obviously, we saw this film back in the day. We both got the DVD, and I totally understand both your opinions of this movie. I'm gonna convoy this movie, as in it's one of those where 10-4 rubber duck, get in my back door, where it's one of those things where there's a lot of nostalgia on show, like speaking to me, and I think it's got a great cast. I really like the jumping back and forth between the stories and stuff, and I think it does like a great job balancing that cast. I still think that is a really, I don't know, maybe unappreciated part of the movie, is that you've got all those characters and they're all really clearly well defined, which is like you said, Smith, it was like an hour and a half film. I still remember coming out of the cinema thinking like, that film was amazing as a 22-year-old. Do I think it's as amazing? No, but I'm still going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought you'd be up around
I thought you'd go higher for a second there, but
for me, no. I might actually get rid of the DVD having watched it today, because I'm like,
wow,
I only want
come
films.
On,
I know, and I've got that nostalgia. It's one of my first DVDs, but in terms of space and my partner wanting more of it,
Go
films that aren't the very top level. Go has to go. Yeah.
And guys, what did you think of Go? Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us on Offradar Podcast. Let us know what you think of Go, any of the films we've done so far, and give us some suggestions of films to watch.